Thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Rupert Lee-Browne, and I am the founder of Caxton, the original currency card people. So we decided to make a bit of a departure, if you'll excuse the pun, from our normal webinars today. And we are joined by George Jerjian, one of our esteemed Caxton card holders, and also a fascinating person to talk to. So George has a vast amount of experience of life and has wonderful stories to tell. And he retired from work back in 2007. But George, I'm sure you won't mind me saying that you got itchy feet and you decided to find a little bit more out of life. So he unretired and dedicated his life to helping retirees find a new beginning. He's written books, spoken at events, run courses for retirees who want a bit more from their lives. And in fact, we have an offer from George at the end of the webinar, so please stay with us. So as part of his journey in his unretirement, George planned a retirement gap year, traveling to South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and Canada. And here today, we're going to chat about the first leg of his quest to get around the world in 80 days, first with South Africa. So we'll get to hear exactly where he went to in South Africa and some of the sites he visited. But I also wanted to quiz him on some of the details and practicalities of the journey. So George, great to see you. I love talking with you since whatever direction we go in, you've got a great story to tell. To start with, why did you decide to go around the world in 80 days?
Well, first of all, Rupert, thank you for having me on. I'm delighted to be here, and we're going to have fun. To answer your question, why did I choose around the world in 80 days? I've been helping retirees find a new beginning for the last couple of years, and one of the pieces of advice that I was giving them was to take a gap year in order to find themselves. And I found that because I hadn't done it, I wasn't walking my talk. And so I had to take a step back and say, right, I'm going to do this. And there's voices in my head saying, no, too much time, too much money, too much effort. But I had to silence those voices and listen to the inner me that wanted to do this. And when I started looking into it, everything started to flow. I got super excited. I started exploring the possibilities, flights, hotels, etc. And then I realized this is such a huge thing. I needed a travel agency, custom-made travel agency to help me do this. Now, why did I decide to do the 80 days around the world was because when I was an adolescent, I fell in love with the book, Jules Verne book, Around the World in 80 Days. And I always wanted to do that. And but life got in the way, as it usually does. And retirement was sort of like life knocking on my door saying, this is the time to do it. You won't get another chance. And it's so true, because I decided, when I decided to travel, I was 69. If I'd done it this year, I wouldn't have had insurance. I wouldn't not have been able to get insurance cover to do this.
Yes, I was going to ask you about insurance, but let's come on to that a little bit later. How long did it take you to actually prepare the trip?
I think probably between 3 and 6 months. The initial thing was light, and then as we got deeper, it got heavier to getting into the weeds of the thing. But it took time because with an agency, it wasn't about the bookings so much. It was about, I only had 2 weeks in each of those countries, well, with the exception of Japan, which was 3. But it's not a lot of time to see everything. No. So the travel agency that I used was experienced enough to know how to help me make my decision, which was eliminating the non-essentials and focusing just on the things and areas and activities that I enjoyed and wanted to see. So yes, that's what took time.
And so did you prepare every single detail? I mean, did you know exactly which cab you were going to be taking to which hotel at which time, and every single flight? Was it down to that level of detail?
Not quite at that granular level, but it was like all the flights were booked, all the hotels were booked.
Okay.
And a lot of them were not hotels. Like in Japan, for example, they were ryokans, which are sort of traditional Japanese hostels. So it was very different. And the hotels I went to were like from 3-star to 4-star to 5-star, depending on where it was. So for example, for the safari, I wanted 5-star because that was an experience that I wanted to be unforgettable.
Yes.
In Tokyo, I just had a shoebox because it was so small,
Yes.
because they're super expensive and you really don't want to be spending money on hotels in Tokyo. So,
yes. And in fact, the ryokans, I think I probably had my worst night's sleep or nights sleeps and ryokans because they are, well, they're just single.
Well, you sleep on a futon and there's no tables.
Yeah,
All the tables and chairs have no legs.
Yes, but that's Japan anyway, and that's for a later date. So, out of interest, who did you fly with? Did you fly with one airline, and did you buy lots of tickets, or how did that work?
I think the initial skeleton of the trip was based on a round the world ticket, which still exists. I was surprised
you could
to hear.
still buy a round the world ticket.
Yes, and it's bizarre, but they still are, and they're also very economic. My round the world trip, which was like London, Cape Town, and then from Johannesburg to Sydney, and then I think it was Auckland to Tokyo, Tokyo to Vancouver. That part was with One World, which is Japan Airlines, British Airways, Qantas. Now that package was an incredible £4,500.
Goodness me!
I know.
Well, that's a fabulous tip for you all. So, and the burning question I thought everyone is asking is, how do you pack for 80 days? I mean, surely there's a lot of washing powder that you take, isn't it? But how do you do that?
Actually, that's a really, really good question. No washing liquid, no washing powder, nothing. What I did was I bought myself a Briggs & Riley suitcase. I love Briggs & Riley. And what I did was I just took only the essential items. Anything that I almost used Charles Lindbergh's philosophy when he was flying across the Atlantic. When he designed his Spirit of St. Louis aircraft, he literally, it was a gasoline tank with wings on it. And I had to do that. I had to be really brutal in eliminating anything that was not necessary. You know, it was like 6 t-shirts, 6 socks, 6 pants, 3-in-1 jacket, so you could disassemble it and reassemble it whenever you needed it. It was incredibly Spartan. 3 shoes, walking stick, that sort of stuff.
But presumably the hotels that you stayed in had some sort of washing facilities. I mean, yes.
In fact, most of them did. Even in Japan, they all had washing facilities, and I would just go in there, throw everything in, come back, put it in the dryer, and out I went. It was incredibly Spartan, incredibly therapeutic as well.
Okay, cool. So enough of the details. Let's move on to South Africa. Now you chose 5 countries to visit.
Yes.
Why South Africa?
Well, I've always wanted to see South Africa. I was born in the Sudan in Africa, and Africa has a pull. And South Africa is probably one of the best functioning countries, even though people will argue on that. And I wanted to go on a safari, a luxury safari in South Africa. So that was the kind of combination.
And had you been on safari before?
In the Sudan, but it was pretty sort of primitive. It wasn't really proper safari as we know it. And the other reason I chose South Africa is because in helping retirees, coming out of retirement is a real problem for a lot of people because they don't realize their identity is compromised, and that there is a need to have courage to move into the next stage of life. And one of the things that I look at is people like Nelson Mandela. And I don't mean his presidential bid or his political life. I'm talking about the transcendence that he recognized in the transcendence he recognized Are we still on? Yep.
Yes,
I
yes.
just thought
Yeah.
we lost you.
No, don't you worry. You carry on. We're
Right.
loving this. Absolutely loving this.
27 years in jail, and the man comes out of that jail without feeling any remorse, anger, vengeance, or vindictiveness.
Right. And so you went to Robben Island. We'll come on to Robben
We'll
Island.
come to that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so is the time? So you went sort of March, April last year. Good time to go.
Yes, it was great.
Okay, so it wasn't too hot, too cold.
It was perfect weather.
Okay, cool. And so how did you travel? How did you travel around? Once you got to South Africa, how did you travel around?
Within Cape Town, it was taxis and Ubers, effectively.
And your Uber app, your UK based Uber app worked fine.
Worked perfectly well, yes, and it was tied into my Caxton card, so
Okay.
everything worked beautifully.
Excellent.
And from Cape Town, I flew to George. What a lovely town, obviously. And from George, I rented a car and drove to Plettenberg, which is effectively the Hamptons of the South Africans. It's where the sort of the wealthy playground. And in Plettenberg, what I did was I hiked on the Rauberg Peninsula, which is the most incredible peninsula to hike on, because it's got these jagged rocks leading to the ocean, where you've got seals swimming there, and it's so beautiful. You sort of take your eyes off the road and trip up, because you're looking at the beauty of nature and trying to do two things at the same time. And as it was a grueling 2.5-hour obstacle course, more than a hike, but it was a delightful experience.
And so this is the garden route, and so does the landscape vary considerably? I mean, or is it all pretty much,
No. I mean, the ocean is the big thing, obviously, and there's some beautiful vistas. It's also dotted with some lovely towns like Kanisa and Wilderness, and that's the name of the town.
Right.
But the interesting thing is that you do have shanty towns in between, which is kind of unnerving a little bit, especially if you're driving on your own. But other than that, it was beautiful. So yeah, that was the garden route.
And on the map that we've just seen, there's mention of Oudtshoorn. So was there anything particularly about Oudtshoorn that you wanted to go and see? I mean, what was?
Right. Now, the reason Oudtshoorn came on my screen, as it were, with the travel agents, was because I had to work my way, drive back through the interior of South Africa as opposed to the coastline. And so Oudtshoorn was a natural stopping place, because it's also famous for its ostrich feathers and its ostrich farms.
Okay.
And just like the wine country was populated by French Huguenots, so was Oudtshoorn. French Huguenots were thrown out of France by the Catholic king. 300 families came down to South Africa, and that's why there's Stellenbosch and Frankfurt, because the French Huguenots came and planted vineyards. Now, coming to Oudtshoorn, because that's an ostrich country, I had a day with an ostrich farmer, third generation. He'd worked the land for 40 years, bringing up these ostriches. And I just, in the course of our conversation, I mean, I actually had ostrich steak, which is so close to filet mignon, you couldn't tell the difference. But when I was in the car driving with the ostrich farmer, I asked him a question, just came up, was like, I said, do ostriches really put their heads in the sand? And he said to me, in my 40 years of working here, I've never seen a single ostrich do that. He said the only things that do that are politicians.
Right. Complete. Okay. Yes. Complete myth. Complete myth.
So which really leads, and this is about curiosity and observation on my travels, and these were the nuggets I was looking for.
Yes,
Because how
absolutely.
many things do we hear growing up and believe it to be true? We don't question it. And, this is time in life when we should be questioning things.
For sure. So, talking of questioning, there's a question that I've got, which is relates to my to my drinking habits. I'm an enormous fan of South African wine. So, you travelled to the wine country, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And
Franschhoek, sorry.
what was the best? What was the most enjoyable thing about the wine country? Obviously, apart from the wine.
I think in Franschhoek, which is a smaller vineyard collective, if you like to call it that way, compared to Stellenbosch, which is a much better known area. The beauty with Frankreich was that I went to they had about 45 wineries in Frankreich, and I went to two of the best ones. The first one was called Babylon Storen. Why did I like it so much? Because I tasted 10 wines over a meal, which you can see in the photograph. There was cheeses and cold meats and fruits and salads and amazing bread together with the wine. And when you're drinking and testing 10 different wines, it's good to be eating in between. And it was just wonderful, not just because the food was wonderful and the wine was excellent, but because I was sitting with a vista in front of me of a vineyard with the sun shining down, and I was in an air-conditioned glass restaurant, so to speak. And it was just amazing. And then they've got their act together in the sense that the whole package of seeing how the wine is made, bottled, etc., it's all there, really quite remarkable, and one of the best that I've seen.
Okay, and so from the luxury of the wine area, you then returned back to Cape Town. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, and I had 2 days there before I flew out to have my safari experience. So in Cape Town, I had the opportunity to go to Robben Island. I explained that about the Mandela story. I'd read his book about his challenges and how he overcame them and his mindset. And so I wanted to actually go there to see what the experience he had. And while I was there, I met with one of the guides who was a previous political prisoner there. He was a young lad when Mandela was there. And that's the man there in the third photograph
Okay.
that I'm with. But Robben Island is an island that as you approach it, it's got these jagged cement look, which is really ugly. And they already warn you as you arrive at the island, this is kind of a brutal place. And it really kind of was. And I think from the stories that I'd read and from listening to the guide, they had a pretty rough time there. And also the guards had a hard time because any young kids that were sent there to learn about being a guard, if they ever softened up, they would be reprimanded and thrown out. So only the hard survived. And you can see this environment in which Mandela was, and yet he still managed to keep a nobility of spirit. And it's a transcendence. That's what I was looking for. How do you transcend these emotional feelings and translate that to the retirement space?
Of course. Yes, I mean, quite a staggering story. 27 years.
Sorry, Rupert, I just wanted to point out to you that last slide picture on the right is actually Mandela's cell. Yes, that one there.
Wow.
And he had a rougher time than the general prisoners, where my guy Vuliani was in. Vuliani was in a large room with 40 people, and they had showers. Mandela didn't have toilet facilities. He had a red bucket, which you can see in that picture.
Right. Extraordinary. Quite extraordinary. Okay, so obviously Robben Island is a must. And as ever, safaris are a must in South Africa too. So this, tell us about how you got to the safari area, and where was it exactly?
Right. I flew out of Cape Town to a place called Hoedspruit, which is kind of the entrance to the to the Kruger National Park and to the Timbavati Nature Reserve and Game Reserve, which is where I went. If you can imagine that Kalahari is 20,000 square kilometers, the Timbavati is only 500 square kilometers, so it's small, and it borders on the it borders with Mozambique. But it's a beautiful place that I went to. It's called Rockfig in the Timbavati Rockfig Lodge in the Timbavati Nature Reserve. And I had 5 extraordinary days of safari, 6 to 9 in the morning and 4 to 7 in the evening. And for 4 days out of that 5, I was on my own with the driver guide and the tracker.
How extraordinary! And so, what did you get to see? Did you get to elephants, lions?
Yeah, I saw. I saw the big 5.
Okay.
This was the driver, as you can see in the picture, the driver and the tracker.
Okay.
And I saw the big 5, which are lion, leopard, elephant.
And this is your own footage, is it now?
This is my own footage. You see, the elephants actually came to the Rockfig Lodge,
right?
Because the owner had a watering hole just below the swimming pool. And on that particular day, 15 elephants turned up. It was an amazing experience to watch.
How fabulous.
Also tracked lionesses with their cubs going hunting in the evening. And the most beautiful part was the leopard. An extraordinary, I think it's on the left side.
Yes, on the left of the screen.
Yeah, the leopard is an extraordinary animal, solitary, but it's beautiful, elegant.
Yes. And so how long did you spend on your safari?
5 days.
5 days.
Morning and night.
Okay. And in terms of other things, is that a hunting dog on the right?
That's a wild dog, or it could be a hyena. I'm never quite sure, but they're
like a hunting dog.
Ugly as they're smelly. Oh
right.
My God.
Yes. Now, just a quick quiz. So, what is the collective noun for giraffe? I know this one.
You're testing me now.
I am. I know this one. So would you believe it? It's a tower of giraffe.
That's very interesting. I was going to go for neckers, but that's fine. That works.
Yeah, that's an island.
I know.
Owned by a multimillionaire. Okay, so rude question alert.
Yes.
This whole trip,
yes.
Not the one in South Africa and not the safari, but the whole trip. How much did that actually cost? Because I think that's my burning question about the whole of this trip. What was it? What was the final bill?
Okay, let me preamble it. And this was actually one of my challenges, was the cost of this. But in fact, the number was £45,000, which I think is about $60-something thousand.
Okay.
And really, the beauty of this, as I talk about in the book, is that, and I'm letting out a secret here, was that I sold my interest in a commercial real estate in the US, in the New Jersey area. And being a non-US person, my lawyers had to withhold the tax, which they overestimated. And once the IRS got my money, they weren't too keen on letting it go. And it took 3 years and a bit to get my money back, which was around $50-something thousand plus interest at 8% for 3 years. So really, the IRS covered my trip.
Right. How fabulous. That is, well, so 45 grand for 80 days. I think that's quite good value, actually. I mean, obviously you were washing your undies every day, but there we go. That would have cut down on costs. So that was my rude question. That's out of the way.
Let's put it this way, Rupert. If I had gone first class on my round the world ticket,
yes,
and I had did my washing elsewhere, I reckon the trip would have probably cost closer to 120,000.
Wow. Okay. So basically, it's something for everybody, I'd say, rich or indeed poor. So, are there any other places you wish you'd visited when you were in South Africa or Southern Africa?
Yes, I originally wanted Botswana, but I had to drop Botswana because of time factors. And my travel agent told me that, you're going to need an extra week. And I go, nope, can't do that. So they said, well, Botswana's out. But
Right.
Botswana, I wanted to do a potential safari in the Okavango Delta, which I think is where you went, horseback riding.
Yes.
It's safari on horseback. That sounds like the real deal.
Well, that's a whole webinar all on its own, frankly.
I can believe that.
If anyone has to do it, I absolutely recommend it. So,
to answer your question, Rupert,
yes. Sorry.
What other places would I have wanted to go? It would have been the Blue Train from Cape Town to Pretoria. It's 1,000 miles of train going through that. And there were a couple of things that I actually missed out on, which I was supposed to have been booked on, only because I thought in the past I would have not missed anything. I would have ticked every box. But I thought to myself, no, I'm too tired. It's going to add another 2 hours to my 6-hour drive from Oudtshoorn to Franschhoek. I'm not doing this.
Yes. Yes, and we've got a question from the audience. How much time would you have spent if you only went to South Africa?
I think probably anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, if South Africa was the only place I was going, because I think you can't really see it. I mean, even that is some people will tell you that Australia is a place where if you go that you can't cover in a couple of weeks.
Right.
You can't even cover in a couple of months. You need a whole year to get under the skin and see Australia, possibly like most Australians haven't seen.
Right. And so you drove about a little bit. So you did the garden route.
Yes.
Was it relatively okay to drive over there as a foreigner? And did you feel safe?
Okay, this was actually it's a really good question. South Africa is not the safest of places to drive, because if you do a left turn and you go into a shanty town, you're done. Your iPhone will cover a family's living expenses for many, many months. This is a really important question, because I was incredibly careful. I had my GPS. I did not veer off. Even going to the bathroom you don't know where to stop. You almost sort of, every time you stop in a place you don't know, there's an element of risk that you're taking.
Right. So I think the message is it's safe if you take precautions.
Yeah, you must take precautions. And and just on a final point, if you're in a place, even in a relatively safe space, and it's coming, dusk is coming, it's nighttime, take a taxi. Don't risk it. Don't try to save money walking. Take a taxi.
So it's rather like being in Mayfair in that case.
Very close.
Good. So in terms of the money side of things, of course you did the whole trip with your Caxton card. Have you got any special tips for travelers when it comes to money?
I think Caxton, the reason I use Caxton is because it's a debit card, and I wanted to make sure I didn't come back home with debts. So I put in the money that I needed to use, and I had a backup card, which I didn't use, not even once. So Caxton actually really helped me to go through. I only had one incident in South Africa where I was in a cafe and I'd forgotten my code. So I phoned Caxton, the number you have on the back of the card, and I was helped within 3 minutes.
Right, excellent. And you do know, of course, that that the app, your Apple app or your Google app, will show you the PIN code. So it's in there, so you can actually get your PIN code from your app.
I know. I discovered that later.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Good.
Yes.
Excellent. So we've got an offer, but George, I think you've got an offer as well, because we're short on time, and obviously we want to know all about your courses and your books.
Okay, just very quickly, the Odyssey of an Elder is coming out on 8th of July on Amazon, all Amazon sites. In the meantime, I'm making an offer to Caxton and to others to pre-order the book with a 25% discount, where you get 3 bonuses, one of which is a live 1-hour webinar on the 29th of July that you have access to. So all you have to go is to you just go to my website, Jerjian.com, and press on the Odyssey of an Elder, and it'll take you to the landing page to sign up.
Well, that's fabulous. That's a very generous offer. So I will not be here next week. I'm off on my own travels, but you're covering Australia. So obviously you flew from Cape Town to somewhere in Australia. So we thought it would be rather good to have a real life Australian introducing you and asking the questions. Tune in, not this time, 12:30 this time next week, to hear George's next part or next leg of his phenomenal Odyssey. So it just leaves for me to say thank you very much, George. That's been fascinating, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks once you've covered Australia. But thank you all for coming in as well.
Thank you, Rupert, and thank you everyone else.
Cracking.